The Tommy gun, drums, and trumpet fanfare sound the beginning of some of our favorite movies for almost 70 years. Everyone knows the 20th Century Fox logo. But now, just 2 decades into the 21st century, the mouse in charge has decided to erase the name, leaving only 2 major studios left bearing a marker of their original founder. From immigrant beginnings to jail time, it's a tale of the good old American dream. A little boom, a little bust, a little bribery, and then the bum's rush. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Grab some popcorn as we spill the beans on the man who basically invented the way we watch movies, William Fox. Chapter 1: The American Dream. Here's the lowdown on William Fox. Just like Adolf Zukor of Paramount, who we talked about the last time you were here, Fox was born in Hungary as Vilmos Fuchs. Now, unlike Zukor, who came stateside of legal age, little Vilmos probably wouldn't remember much of his motherland, having immigrated to New York City when he was just 9 months old. Once settled, the Fuchs had 12 more children, of which only 6 survived. Growing up in the Lower East Side tenements at the age of 8, Vilmos fell off the back of an ice truck he had hitched a ride on and broke his arm in 3 places. Too poor for a proper sawbone, a local dentist removed his elbow joint completely, leaving Vilmos with a permanently bent arm for the rest of his life. Tough break, kid, but it gets tougher. As a child, he worked as a paperboy and sold candy, even going so far as to set up a syndicate of neighborhood boys to peddle the sweets to crowds up and down Central Park. At the age of 10, Vilmos dropped out of 3rd grade to work at a garment factory, D. Cohen & Sons, at 25 Lispenard Street, lying about his age and forging his documents to work 11 hours a day for a measly $8 a week. Still, those scraps helped pull the family out of poverty. As an adult, Vilmos Americanized his name and changed it to William Fox, and married Ava Leo, a girl he had been courting for 5 years. Newly married, Fox was still working in the garment industry, now for a cloth shrinking company for $15 a week. Young and full of nerve, Fox asked for a raise to $20, but it wasn't going to jive, so Fox broke ties and went to business for himself, opening the Knickerbocker Cloth Examining and Shrinking Company in April of 1900. But shrinkage was always a struggle, and Fox was always on the up and down. One day, while walking down 14th Street, Fox came across something brand new, a parlor called the Automatic Vaudeville Company, an arcade with peep show machines, phonographs, fortune-telling machines. You gotta remember, this is 1904. All this was state-of-the-art, coin-operated wizardry. The turn-of-the-century equivalent to whatever cool gadget is hip when you're watching this thing. It was amazing, and Fox happened to have a bit of extra dough for investing. But, as they say, a sucker with money is bound to go bust. A slippery real estate agent representing J. Stewart Blacken offered to sell Fox a 2-story bustling slot machine arcade at 700 Broadway in Brooklyn. Assured that it was a booming business, Fox went in with 2 others and opened for business in May of 1904. On opening day, only 2 customers came in. Fox and partners were duped. Business never improved on the slots racket, and the real estate guy had sold them a lemon. This was, after all, the end of the Gilded Age. Fox had to come up with an idea, so he tried something new: motion pictures. Now, when I say motion pictures, again, I gotta check you back into the reality of the time. This was 1904. Edison and Dickerson's The Great Train Robbery had only come out the year before, and movies at the time were just beginning to be more than a loose association of moving pictures. Now, only one other person had attempted a movie theater in Brooklyn, and it went belly up. Fox would have to do better. He renovated the 2nd story of his arcade with a 146-seat theater and a tin pan piano, and reopened in October of 1904. Business still blew. So Fox hired a ballyhoo man, someone that did sideshow tricks on the sidewalk, and promised to finish the show upstairs in the movie theater. And the winds of fortune changed, the tune of $40,000 to $75,000 in the first year. That's $1 million or $2 million in today's dollar. And just like that, Fox was on his way to being a theater mogul. Chapter 2. A Little Light Corruption. Opening a movie theater wasn't a trade secret. 1906, New York had issued 200 Nickelodeon licenses, including a few to another upstart, Marcus Lowe, who was getting into the movies across the East River. Lowe would go on to be one of the founders of what eventually would become MGM. But I'm getting distracted. Fox didn't stop with just one theater. He rolled the profits from this first theater into acquiring and renovating more theaters all around Brooklyn. By 1908, he had enough money to buy the dilapidated 1,600-seat Unique Theater at 194 Grand Street, Brooklyn. Revamping and branding it the Comedy Theater, Fox ran a split P program that showed movies along with vaudeville acts and doubled the price of entry to 10 cents. No more Nickelodeons. It was the beginning of the movie palace era, something that Fox tapped into early on. The movie-going clientele were typically non-English speaking immigrants from Eastern Europe. They came in after working long hours looking for diversion. While other early motion picture establishments matched the shabbiness of immigrant life, Fox offered a view of something better, a place where they could have a public social experience with strangers despite their ethnic differences. But it wasn't all starry-eyed melting pot diversity. Let's get real here. Poor ethnically diverse people could also be unpredictable and an easy target for scapegoating. A panic from a misunderstanding here or there, and suddenly the officials and goody two-shoe clergy groups aren't so kind to the movie theater racket. A group of leading Protestant ministers wrote Mayor George B. McClellan demanding that all Nickelodeons be closed on Sundays, the holiest day of the week, and for many theaters, the most profitable. For a year, New York Police Commissioner Theodore Bingham, who had no love for the theaters or their ethnic patrons, threatened to arrest anyone who worked a picture show on Sundays. Fox, who had just started a rental exchange supplying theaters with movies called the Greater New York Film Rental Company, responded to the city's bullying by forming a coalition of 110 exhibitors, Fox's Motion Picture Association, and taking the city and their penal code up to the New York Supreme Court. Using the letter of their own code, Fox got the state justices to side with the exhibitors and allow screenings on Sundays. A small temporary victory that set Fox up as a mover and shaker in the young movie industry. Despite his growing reputation, Fox ultimately knew theaters in Brooklyn were still small time. The real action was in Manhattan. But to do business on the island meant doing business with the notoriously corrupt political machine Tammany Hall and political boss Big Tim Sullivan. Never heard of Tammany Hall? Tammany Hall started as a charity to help newly arrived immigrants, but became a democratic political machine for controlling politicians and elections. Boss Tweed, that was Tammany Hall. You heard of vote early, vote often? Yeah, that was Tammany Hall's modus operandi. Big Tim Sullivan was a New York entrepreneur, congressman, and a master of election fraud. He also liked to have his hand in every den of vice and theater in the Lower East Side. When Fox tried to negotiate a deal to lease the Dewey Theater owned by Big Tim, located near Union Square for $50 a day with 3 months paid in advance, Big Tim insisted instead that the deal also include taking over the Gotham Theater in Harlem for a combined annual lease of $90,000, which 50% was due up front. Fox relented and got his first taste of Manhattan. Despite the fact that Big Tim was known to use box office draws as his own personal slush fund, Fox focused on drawing in the crowds. On Thanksgiving Day 1908, the Dewey sold 12,000 tickets for 10 cents apiece, a theater record that had variety writing. Altogether, the Dewey comes close to being about the best run and most profitable moving picture place in New York. While Fox was digging up a gold mine, the Goody Two-Shoes Anti-Movie League didn't sit quietly on their hands. They were out there pushing the straight and narrow and hounding public officials. And on Christmas Eve 1908, Mayor McClellan relented to the righteous, revoking all 551 licenses of movie picture houses in New York based on public safety concerns. So Fox goes from having a record-breaking Thanksgiving to being shut down the night before Christmas. But unlike the earlier run-in with the city, this time Fox was prepared. After all, he was paying rent to Big Tim and Tammany Hall, and they didn't want to see their cash flow freeze up. On December 26, Fox's lawyer had a temporary injunction against the mayor, and theaters reopened by 8 p.m. The following January, the New York Supreme Court came in again and put the kibosh on the overzealous City Hall. With the support of powerful friends, Fox began building theaters around New York at a furious pace. In the span of 4 years, Fox had 14 movie theaters in the New York City area and spent over $4 million on land and construction. Where'd the money come from? Let's say it's good to know someone like Big Tim Sullivan. Even occasionally you had to look the other way and get your hands dirty with a little light corruption. Chapter 3. Taking Down a Monopolist. Fox's rise in the movie exhibition industry didn't go unnoticed, and it wasn't long before we come across the biggest name in movies, the Wizard of Menlo Park himself, Thomas Edison. Sorry to rain on Tesla lovers, but the hard fact is Edison had a key transformative role in the creation of motion pictures. It was his labs and demonstrations that sparked off creative engineering endeavors all around the world. The Lumiere brothers got their idea to show movies in that one Paris basement after seeing a demonstration the Edison company did in France. But the fact was Edison himself didn't think much of the movies, and even less so of the money-grubbing entrepreneurs who swooped in trying to cash in on his invention. They don't call it the Gilded Age for nothing. Well, at the age of 60, Edison turned over his film patents to Edison Manufacturing to focus on his true passion, the phonograph. At first, the goal of Edison Manufacturing and their technology licensing was, quote, a system of business in which everybody is satisfied, everybody making money, a square deal for everyone. Nice sentiment. Too bad it didn't last. Ultimately, Edison put Frank L. Dyer in charge of Motion Picture Patents Company, a patent attorney from a family of patent attorneys who thought even less of movie folks and set out to squeeze every buck and monopolize the industry. Family of patent attorneys. Dinner with the folks must have been a real blast. First, the MPPC monopolized the projector technology, levying a licensing fee on every projector. Then in 1910, the MPPC opened its own Film Exchange General Film Company and all but declared war on independent exchanges, which they saw as profit-stealing middlemen. The way it worked was you had film producers who made the movies. Most of these guys were falling in line under the MPPC. These film producers would sell their goods to the film exchanges, which would package the films and turn around and rent them to the movie theaters themselves. On January 1909, there were 120 of these film exchanges renting MPPC films around the United States. By 1911, the GFC, mainly through revoking licenses, had shut down all but one. William Fox's The Greater New York Film Rental Company, which had about 500 theater subscribers. The president of the GFC, Jeremiah J. Kennedy, put the crosshairs on Fox himself and started playing hardball. He spread rumors that the GFC would revoke Fox's licenses to try to scare theaters into signing up with the GFC. It didn't work. Then on November 14, 1911, Kennedy sent Fox a letter saying that his license would be revoked on December 4, 1911, because the rental agency broke the rules and showed one of the MPPC movies at a brothel. Fox had nothing to do with it, but it was the leverage Kennedy needed to shut him down. Unless, of course, he sells company to the GFC. Now, the reason they wanted to buy was because even though the MPPC was trying to monopolize the market, there were still a few independent producers, and the GFC would rather transfer those paying theater customers Fox had through sale rather than lose a few to outside producers. Now, thinking they held all the cards, Kennedy lowballed Fox. Negotiations came down to the last minute on Friday, December 1st. Fox was to sell his Greater New York Film Rental Company to the MPPC for $90,000 on December 11th. But if Fox's license was revoked on the 4th, as the original letter had claimed, all his customers would have abandoned the exchange and the GFC would have paid 90 big ones for nothing. So Kennedy agreed to withdraw the license cancellation and the film rental operations proceeded normally. Then on December 7th, with the sale papers in hand, Fox had his lawyer contact Kennedy with the bombshell. The deal was off. The very next day, the MPPC issued a license cancellation, effective 8 a.m. Christmas Day. Merry Christmas. But Kennedy just handed Fox and the movie-going public a brilliant present: evidence. On December 16th, Fox came back and slapped the Motion Pictures Patent Company with a big honkin' lawsuit, filing a complaint that the MPPC was created to stifle competition and drive the independents out of business. The dealings of December 1911 were just some of the proof. And to represent Fox and his interests, some of the finest talent to come out of none other than Tammany Hall. Fox's timing couldn't be more perfect, as President Taft, weak in the poll numbers, fell on the populist move of busting trusts to stir up support. Now, this was untested ground, as the courts were used to going after major industry, not this frivolous movie business. Fox did not go into this fight alone, though. There were other companies involved, but Fox's team was doing most of the legal legwork. The gears of justice ground into action rather quickly, and by August of 1912, the U.S. government took up the case and petitioned against the Motion Pictures Patent Company on antitrust grounds. But Fox didn't have time to celebrate. There was trouble at home. His New York protectorate, Big Tim, was losing his mind. Literally. A series of personal disasters and a bout of syphilis led Tim to being institutionalized in a sanitarium in Yonkers. And yet, despite being in the loony bin, Big Tim still won the congressional election in 1912 by a landslide. That's good old Tammany Hall for you. Released in March of 1913, Big Tim went to live with his brother Patrick, aimlessly wandering about until August 31st, where his body was cut in half by a freight train. The official word is it was an accident, but no autopsy was performed. The train conductor reported no steam or vapor from the body, a usual sight when a living person gets hit. That and the New York City coroner's office was notoriously corrupt and may have been paid to look the other way. Amazing how much things have changed since then. Well, without Big Tim's influence, William Fox tried to bring the business back on the up and up. When Big Tim's brothers sued Fox, who had abandoned the Dewey Theater, which had fallen into disrepair, Fox came clean about Big Tim's shady dealings. In return, Fox tried to get repayment of a $31,000 loan he had made to Big Tim. But the fact is, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as the conservatives of Big Tim's estate were painting the inside of their own pockets green. While dealing with all of that, the Motion Pictures Patent Company was still trying to get back and ruin Fox for his involvement with the pending antitrust case. To fight back, Fox poured money into the case, which finally went to trial on December of 1914. After 10 months of considering the testimony, briefs, and exhibits totaling 4,235 pages, the ruling came in October 1st, 1915, that the MPPC was indeed a monopoly and needed to be broken apart. They appealed, but another ruling in the patent case, Motion Pictures Patent Company versus Universal Film Manufacturing Company, spelled doom for the monopolist. That Supreme Court decision, coming on April 9, 1917, had Justice John Clark declaring Motion Pictures Patent Company had a, quote, potential power for evil over an industry which must be recognized as an important element in the amusement life of the nation. If sustained, it would be gravely injurious to the public interest. How do you like them apples? The patent lawyers had lost, and Edison sold off his interest in the movie business in 1918. The Wizard of Menlo Park and the man that invented movies was out for good. And now the field was wide open for a studio system to emerge, and moguls like William Fox took advantage of the newly found freedom. Chapter 4. The Rise of Fox Film. One important lesson Fox learned from the MPPC was to never become beholden to a supplier. In the middle of the legal battle with the MPPC, in January of 1914, Fox set up the Box Office Attraction Company, BOA, as an independent distribution and production company. At first, he planned to distribute European films, but he found out the European producers were only willing to sell their worst junk to the Americans. And so foreign films got a bad rap stateside and had nothing to do with subtitles. So by June of 1914, Fox was done with foreign film trade. With the MPPC still in power at the time, independent producers weren't making enough films to supply his theaters. So Fox took it on himself to produce his own movies. The problem was Fox didn't know a thing about movie making. Fox had to rely on J. Gordon Edwards, who he shipped to Europe to get some schooling. Upon his return, he was put in charge of producing BOA's first 5-reel feature film, Life's Shop Window, based on a book where a young wife and mother runs away from her life with a villainous adventurer. The movie opened in November of 1914, but it flopped because, as Fox admits, he took a salacious book and tried to turn it into family-friendly entertainment. Undeterred, Fox continued to ramp up production, contracting 5 directors, a string of Broadway talent, and opened 15 exchange offices nationwide, each with their own screening rooms. BOA's first important hit opened on December 28, 1914, an impressive animated short by cartoonist Winsor McCay, Gertie the Dinosaur. This 12-minute short features one of the first character animations, created by McCay with assistant John A. Fitzsimmons on 10,000 sheets of rice paper. Gertie would then inspire another animation mogul by the name of Walt Disney. It's a small world after all. Between production costs and a legal battle Fox was engaged with in 1914 with the MPPC, and oh yeah, a big world war starting to heat up in Europe, Fox was getting strung out financially. To infuse the venture with some cash, the box office attraction company was incorporated on February 1st, 1915 as Fox Film, with initial capitalization of $500,000, of which 4/5 of the money came from New Jersey financial titans who weren't all that much different from Big Tim, only they played on slightly more of the right side of the law. Fox's first bona fide success came unexpectedly in an adaptation of a play by Spanish writer José Echegaray. A Fool There Was. Budgeted for a low $25,000, Fox needed a female lead and accepted the director's suggestion of Theodosia Goodman, a struggling actress who had played a bit part in the director's last film. The film was made. Fox changed Theodosia's name to Theda Bara and released it without much fanfare. But crowds couldn't get enough of Theda, selling 4,900 tickets in one day in Kansas City and setting box office records in San Francisco, Seattle, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Cleveland, Portland, and Dallas. It was so successful that by May of 1917, it was the first feature film to reach $1 million in profits. And at the heart of it all was Theda, the antidote to the sweet, sympathetic lights of Mary Pickford and Lillian Gish. Despite some missteps, Fox finally realized he had to go all in on Bara's vampish sex appeal, giving the Jewish girl from Ohio a full-blown Arabian backstory, including juicy details like her name was an anagram for Arab death. It was weapons-grade baloney, but the public ate it up. By the end of 1916, Fox released 18 feature films starring Theda. Fox Film had essentially exploded out of the gate, with a gross revenue climbing to $4.24 million and a profit of $365,000 in 1916. In 1917, Fox would make Theda Bara's best-known film, Cleopatra, shot on the West Coast in the newly acquired Western Avenue studio to the tune of $500,000. That was followed by Salome, another salacious movie with Theda Bara in the lead role. All these movies became huge successes despite going up against censorship boards at the time. But at the height of her success, Theda Bara quits the screen in 1919. She was sick of the vamp character she continued to play, sick of the superficial demands of being a leading lady, and even sick of their fans. She even showed a reporter a fan letter that read, "Please pardon for addressing Honorable Self, but will so kind send honorable portrait of Honorable Self as honorably naked as possible." 1919 equivalent of please send nudes. Other stars and talent began to leave Fox. With the close of the war, the movie industry was changing. Big Wall Street money was starting to come in, and ruthless players like Adolf Zukor saw where the public sentiment was going. The Prohibition movement, who shared many of the prominent figures with the anti-movie and censorship crowds, were gaining ground and winning victories. In essence, the start of the 20s was a bummer at Fox Film. The spending had been cut and the pennies pinched. Fox Film was still a family, but Fox learned that some things were just business, and at the end of the day, you couldn't have a company family without cash flow. It took 4 years for Fox to regain his footing and release another high-budget feature. 1924's The Iron Horse, directed and produced by John Ford. It was a smash success. Already we begin to see the realities of competing with the majors. You needed big budgets if you wanted to play the game. In 1925, Fox took his company public, generating $6.6 million in funds, and forged ahead, spending $3 million to improve his West Coast studio and buying up theaters across the nation. Fox also started raising budgets, from a production budget of $6.6 million in 1924 to $12 million in 1926. Fox contracted the best talent like Howard Hawks, John Ford, and F.W. Murnau. But it was Fox's next big investment that would revolutionize the movies: sound. Chapter 5: The Real Studio Behind Talkies. Here's a skinny. In 1929, there were two competing methods for delivering sound at the movies. First was sound on disc, where a film was synchronized to a phonographic record. This is what Warner Bros. Would use with Vitaphone when they ultimately released The Jazz Singer in 1927. But Fox knew this system was never going to fly in the marketplace. First, the delicate synchronization of film and phonographic disc wouldn't work in the rough and tumble world of film exhibition. And second, if a film needed to be cut, say by a state censor board, the sound would immediately get out of sync. You'd have to recut the phonograph, and it wasn't like they had Pro Tools handy. Fox instead set his eyes on an alternative method, printing the sound on the film and using a separate sensor in the projector to read that sound information. But in 1925, it was still in the R&D phase, being developed by Audion inventor Lee DeForest. Problem was, the 52-year-old DeForest had become somewhat of a crank, working on an early ad blocker for radio that could be operated with a remote control. Fox instead chose to work with one of his protégés, Theodore Case, who patented two important sound-on-film devices that improved the quality. Fox and Case going together to form the Fox-Case Corporation in 1926, and for insurance pick up the option to a German sound-on-film system called Tri-Ergon. A month later, Lee DeForest, being as cantankerous as ever, sues Fox-Case, as to be expected. Then Warner Bros. Releases Don Juan, the first use of Vitaphone for a feature film, and goes on to become a smash hit. Sound on disc was first to market, and it was showing it had legs. But that didn't ruffle Fox's feathers, because he knew Vitaphone was going nowhere. Still, the development of sound on film was slow. The demonstration that convinced Fox to bring Case on board sounded good in a small room, but failed to please the ear in a 1,000-seat theater. You couldn't tell a rooster's squawk from a pig squeal. Fox needed some major help and expertise from some companies that knew a thing or two about electronics for delivering sound. Now this is where it gets a little complicated. In 1920 and 21, the three big electronics companies, GE, AT&T, and Westinghouse, all had cross-licensing agreements to share their major talking picture patent rights and licenses, so they couldn't sue each other for infringement. AT&T backed the Warner Bros. Vitaphone technology. If Fox wanted to get in the game, he would need the help of either GE or Westinghouse. He turned to GE, which at the time owned RCA, a company set up to purchase radio stations owned by American Marconi, a takeover encouraged by feds who didn't feel comfortable about their home team radio stations being owned by the Italians. Fox invited the RCA engineers and showed off his system. They struck a deal with a handshake on September 23, 1926, but then almost immediately the terms began to change. Ultimately, RCA backed off entirely, and in early 1927, RCA releases their own sound-on-film process, Photophone, which was pretty much a copy of what Fox was doing. Back to square one, but then something out of the blue happens. The commercial manager at AT&T wants a meeting with Fox. Turns out the big wigs at AT&T, despite their rosy public appearance, couldn't stand the Warner Brothers. It was almost a year since the smash success of Don Juan, and they had yet to sign another studio to their sound-on-disc system. And Warner's was having trouble staying profitable, whereas Fox was on an 11-year winning streak. AT&T wanted Fox to replace Warner's as their studio. Problem was the Warners weren't going to let AT&T out of their contract. The best they could do was create a sublicense. Fox would have access to all of AT&T suppliers Western Electric's technology, and in return, he would pay a royalty to the Vitaphone company, which would be split between Warner's and Western Electric. The Warners had no say in the deal, and Fox signed it on December 31, 1926. The very next day, AT&T sets up a subsidiary, Electric Research Products Incorporated, ERPI, that would focus solely on developing motion picture technologies. AT&T wanted Fox to push Vitaphone sound on disc, but Fox wanted to push his movie tone sound on film. Fox then set out to prove movie tone's superiority by adding it to his newsreels. The first public movie tone screenings occurred in a low-key event on January 21, 1927. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite ready for prime time, and the bigwigs at AT&T weren't totally impressed. Still, they agreed to at least modify their sound recording and duplication machines for sound on film. And then things between AT&T and Warner Brothers get ugly. At one point, AT&T figured the only way out of their contract was to straight up buy the struggling Warner Brothers studio. The animosity between the two companies was so high that Fox himself had to play mediator. The deal never went through, and Western Electric's president threatened to go public and say Warner's had defaulted on their contract by not signing enough theaters for sound. The Warners caved and signed a series of agreements that ended Warner Brothers' exclusive contract, giving ERPI full control over licensing sound on film equipment. So now to make things more confusing, in the early part of 1927, we have three competing sound systems at large. The Western Electric Warner Brothers Vitaphone sound on disc, the Western Electric Fox Movie Tone sound on film, supported by ERPI, and RCA's sound on film Photophone. The decision on which system to adopt was left up to the studios, as there's no point in theaters buying equipment for a technology no studio was using. The remaining unaffiliated movie studios, Paramount, MGM, First National, Universal, and Producers Distributing Company, set up a committee to study the systems for 1 year beginning February 17, 1927. After that, they would pick the best system and then all move as one. Well, this was a horse race Fox wasn't going to lose. Fox poured money into the newsreel business, sending film crews around the world to deliver a weekly package with full sound to his theaters. In September of 1927, Fox released F.W. Murnau's Sunrise, the first feature film utilizing movie tone to synchronize the silent film with music and sound effects. He packaged it with newsreel that featured dictator Benito Mussolini talking about how much he loves America. It was a moderate success. But the very next month, in October of 1927, Warner Brothers releases a film that everybody now associates with the coming era of sound: The Jazz Singer. It was a mega smash hit, and it proved that sound wasn't going to be just a fad. I constantly wonder why The Jazz Singer gets so much credit for kicking off the sound era, considering how many other sound films preceded it. The best I can come up with, it was a cultural thing. A collective light bulb turned on when Al Jolson first said, "You ain't heard nothing yet." Now Warner's was on a winning streak, and come spring of 1928, the consortium of studios was ready to make their choice as to which sound system they would all adopt. They ultimately decided to go with Western Electric and the movie tone sound on film. Fox was right. Vitaphone sound on disc would never have worked. Still, the studios were cautious. After all, they had a catalog of silent film in inventory and didn't want to lose that to sound. Fox pushed ahead full steam, building a $7 million state-of-the-art studio on the Fox Hill lot called Movie Tone City. He upped the newsreel division from once weekly to 4 weekly programs by the beginning of 1929. And on March 24, 1929, Fox would make headlines as being the first studio to publicly announce that they would abandon silent pictures in favor of sound for all their productions from then on. Fox film was roaring, but 1929 would be the year that ultimately would destroy William Fox. Chapter 6: A Disaster Movie. In 1929, William Fox was trying to wrap up a deal he had been secretly working on since 27, with another theater magnate, Marcus Lowe, who suddenly died. Fox was trying to buy Lowe's, the parent company of MGM, to thwart Adolf Zukor and Paramount. The deal was for Lowe's head honcho Nicholas Schenck to secretly acquire enough stock for a takeover and then sell it to Fox. Now, in order not to run afoul with the feds, Fox ran this merger deal through the government to get approval. He got an informal okay, so he went ahead with his plans. And Fox didn't count on Lowe's production arm, MGM. When Louis B. Mayer and Irving Thalberg, head of MGM, got whiff of this merger, they were outraged. Not only were their positions as founders of the studio in trouble, they weren't shareholders in Lowe's, and they wouldn't be seeing any of the $50 million Fox would have to raise to seal the deal. So Louis B. Mayer used his political connections with the Hoover administration to get the merger stopped dead. Fox reconsidered his position and offered Mayer, Thalberg, and Lowe's attorney J. Robert Rubin $2 million. It was a bribe, and Mayer backed off, but only temporarily. Fox asked the President Herbert Hoover for a private audience. Hoover was open and interested, but ultimately gave Fox the runaround. Then on July 10th, 1929, Fox was heading out to play golf with Paramount's Adolf Zukor when disaster struck. On the way to the links, a speeding Chrysler smashed into Fox's Rolls Royce, sending the car into 180. Fox's chauffeur, a 36-year-old Joseph W. Boyes, was killed instantly as the car landed on its side. Fox and the woman driving the Chrysler survived, spending 10 days in the hospital. Despite the PR stories spun by the Fox publicist to convince everyone that the big man upstairs was just fine, Fox was not looking good. Fox Film grew feverishly in the summer of '29, but Fox's absence was noticeable. It wasn't until October 24th, 1929, did Fox feel well enough to return to work. And by a stroke of luck perhaps, one of the first things Fox did was call his stockbroker and issue a sell order on October 28th on all shares in companies outside of Fox and Lowe's, which he was still looking to acquire. The very next day, Tuesday, October 29th, 1929, the stock market crashed. Fox's trade the day earlier meant that he personally wasn't wiped out. He had $20 million. And Fox, the company, was bleeding out fast. You see, most of the stock that Fox had been buying were done on margin, short-term loans to buy stocks. If the stock price went up when your loan was due, you just sold the stock and paid off the loan. Well, the stock price dropped, and the banks and institutions that loaned Fox the money to buy Lowe's suddenly panicked. Through multiple maneuvers, Fox managed to keep the company afloat for a little while, but the sharks started sniffing blood. Fox was forced to turn to his biggest creditors, John Otterson running ERPI at AT&T, and Harry Stewart running a banking firm out of Chicago, who together Fox owed a total of $27 million. Otterson and Stewart proposed a voting trust agreement that would secure Fox some long-term financing, and Fox agreed, thinking he had made a deal to save the company. Some financing doors were opened, but then on December 16, 1929, Fox reads in the New York Times that his voting trust partners were looking at a total company takeover and getting ready to dump him. Fox immediately fires back, absolving the voting trust, but Otterson and Stewart have a contract. Otterson and Stewart begin forming support among Fox's top brass. Despite the fact that 1929 had been a stellar year for Fox Film, the company was in absolute chaos. For 4 months, William Fox tries everything to keep the company from disintegrating, but it was too little, too late. A little after midnight on Monday, April 7, 1930, William Fox signed the contract that would sell his shares in the company bearing his name to Harley Clark, a utilities magnate. The deal was for $15 million, an additional $3 million for back wages, and a seat, but not the chair, on the board of directors for at least 1 more year. And just to show there was no bad feelings, all Fox films would carry the title William Fox Presents. Whoop-de-doo. In just less than half a year, everything Fox had been building for the last 15 was totally destroyed. The money from the severance package didn't last long. By 1935, Fox had run out of dough and was forced to declare bankruptcy. 4 years later, in 1939, the feds opened a case against Judge J. Warren Davis, a notoriously corrupt judge who happened to oversee Fox's 5-year personal bankruptcy case. Once the 5-0 opened the books, all the judge's misdeeds came out. It wasn't just Fox. At first, the feds wanted to sweep it under the rug. President Roosevelt even accepted a resignation letter thanking Judge Warren for his years of service. But a colleague, Judge William Clark, who had sparred with Warren on numerous occasions over his corruption, went on the warpath to expose him. And swept up in the accusations of corruption was our old buddy, William Fox. Fox came clean and confessed, testifying against Judge Warren. In his confession, Fox pleaded guilty to bribing a federal judge. In November of 1942, the 63-year-old William Fox surrendered himself and was sent to federal penitentiary at Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. After 6 months of good behavior, William Fox was released. With the goody two-shoes in full swing, the Hays Code in effect in Hollywood, and everyone supposed to be on their best behavior now, no one wanted to work with the ex-con. Fox, the man that led early organizing efforts to protect New York City Nickelodeons, the man that battled Thomas Edison's henchmen in the stranglehold of the Motion Pictures Patents Company. William Fox, the man who created film's first sex symbol with Theda Bara, the man that really pushed sound technology, creating the movies we know and love today, died in 1952, believing himself to be a total failure. And 70 years later, his name would be scrubbed from the studio that he started to avoid confusion with a television network that he had no connection with whatsoever. Welcome to Hollywoodland. Well, I think I need another drink. If you like the tale I weave but need more juicy deets, I can't recommend enough the book The Man Who Made the Movies, The Meteoric Rise and Tragic Fall of William Fox by Venda Krefft. Seriously, it documents his life to such detail that we barely highlight it here. Now, be sure to punch that thumbs up, subscribe, and ring that bell. Let me thank our patrons on Patreon for helping me make this studio investigation possible. Maybe you could pitch in $1 or $2. It all helps. Or maybe you need a new wardrobe. We've got you covered in the merch shelf below. Check it out. Next time on the studios, we'll talk about the Fox after Fox and the rest of the 20th century before it ultimately becomes a meal for the mouse. Till then, keep the popcorn warm, the aisle seat open, and your nose clean. I'll catch you next time on The Studios.